Chapter 5, Home Sweet Home.
You kids had me chasing all over the country,
said Daniel as he tossed off his hat and made his way to the others in the kitchen. He looked rugged, and his eyes were weary. It seemed he had just had the longest day of his life.
And the new wiggle with that gear shift didn't help any,
he said, looking directly at Davy. Guilt was written all over Davy's face when he glanced in Joel's direction. Daniel reached over and gave his boys a big hug. He was a working man with some strength remaining. However, years of working in construction had begun to take its toll on him in his middle age.
You don't know what a relief it is to see you all here. We got worried after we saw your newscast and you didn't come home for a while. The phone lines still aren't right.
Sorry, Dad, we didn't mean to worry you and Mom. We just wanted to make sure that we didn't miss any more coverage in case the floating city came back,
said Joel.
How in the world does that happen?
Asked Daniel. He opened his hands wide in a sweeping gesture.
A city just appeared out of nowhere, floating.
Rachel noticed calluses on his hands from years of hard labor, which she was not used to seeing on her dad. They both worked very hard, but were from different worlds when it came to work. Somehow their personalities were similar. She thought that perhaps it was because they both valued their Jewish heritage and their moral values were comparable.
We didn't see anything other than light rain here. Your station is still playing it. Other stations are picking it up too,
said Lydia. They played Joel and Rachel's coverage for a few minutes. Joel noticed that Judas made sure to include something about the crop circle that they had discovered. He could tell that Judas went out into the field himself to gather more close-ups of the smashed mesh of corn stalks and briars. The newscaster's voice droned on about typical speculations and conspiracy theories. Still, as a Christian news station, he tied it back to Bible verses about deception in the last days, according to biblical prophecy. Some scholars in the interview went further and connected it with the fallen angels from the Old Testament.
Check that out. Rewind it, Mom,
said Davy. Lydia grabbed the remote and rolled it back. Something black slithered in the background right before Judas cut the footage.
Told you so,
said Davy, looking at Joel. Joel grabbed the remote and rolled it back again. There it was. A large black tail wrangled through the underbrush and out of sight.
You guys were right. I would hate to have seen how big that thing was,
he said, realizing how wrong he was to doubt Davy.
It's a good thing that we got out of there when we did,
said Rachel with a shudder.
Oh, I can't stand snakes,
agreed Lydia.
You boys need to be careful going out in these fields. A farmer caught a mountain lion on his camera right down the road the other day,
said Daniel. They watched as Joel and Rachel's footage ended, and another station picked it up. One of the ladies from another station tried to explain the floating city differently. Lydia turned up the TV, and the newscaster's voice attempted the explanation.
It seems that this so-called floating city is, in fact, a rare occurrence called Fata Morgana. This happens when the atmospheric conditions are just right to produce a mirage, much like how one sees a mirage in the desert, or how heat waves seemingly can be visible floating off in the distance. It simply produces a mirror image of what's on the ground into the sky that can be seen from miles away.
Davy jumped out of his seat.
That's not even close to right. We don't have skyscrapers anywhere near Orange County.
That's the mainstream news for you. Get a good story for your station, and the others compete for who can come up with the best spin-off,
said Joel.
Or the best fake news to make it all seem fake. Davy's right. What she said doesn't even make sense,
said Rachel. The news reporter talked about fears of earthquake swarms around the country and local murder cases, but no one paid attention.
Well, you all got the real story first for your station,
said Daniel.
Nice job. You two make a great team,
he said to Joel and Rachel.
Hey, don't forget that I helped too,
said Davy defensively.
Yes, we know, Davy,
said Joel sarcastically. When he saw that he hurt Davy's feelings a little, he lightened his tone and said,
You really did help, even in the middle of that hailstorm. Thanks, bro.
He ruffled his hair, making Davy grin broadly.
And since the phones were down for a while, all of those who caught it on camera were delayed in sending in their images,
said Lydia.
Your footage is the most famous, and they can't take that away from you. This is another sign of the end getting closer than ever.
She noticed some sideways looks and returned her attention toward setting the table. Her feet shuffled around the narrow walkway as she carried the last food platters. Then another news program began. This time, an older news reporter came onto the screen.
This evening, we are looking at a newly renovated facility with top scientists from around the world, the Primary Research Institute of Space and Matter, or PRISM. Located on the border of France, it holds the world's latest and largest hadron collider. Their opening ceremony occurred just moments ago to celebrate the opening of a new tunnel, which will provide innovative capabilities of new technology in particle collision data and analysis.
Hundreds of scientists appeared on the screen and walked toward a seating area within the new tunnel to watch their opening ceremony. The actors made a grand entrance, and many had garbed themselves in strange clothing, ranging from nearly nude undergarments to goatskin with horns. Some wore gargoyle costumes. They began to enact the sacrifice of a lamb.
What is this, a satanic ritual?
Asked Lydia in shock.
Isn't that the place where your parents work, Rach?
Davy started to ask, but a quick warning glance from Joel shut him down. Rachel looked at the screen, and her face flushed when she noticed a quick side view of her mother as one of the leading scientists applauding in the audience. She did not let on. No one else seemed to notice except for Joel. The reporter continued.
PRISM is soon to open a new facility in Jerusalem where Jewish, Christian, and Muslim scientists will work side by side to find the secrets of how our universe was formed. Jewish leaders are very welcoming to Dr. Crowning, the president of PRISM, who shares commonality in his Jewish background. The possibility of a third temple is also in the works within this negotiation. Perhaps this will be the key to bringing peace to the Middle East. PRISM, the universe is in our hands.
Perhaps they should read Genesis 1 to get the answer to how the universe was formed. The universe has and always will be in God's hands,
said Daniel, pointing at the screen.
Amen. Oh, let's just shut that TV off a while and enjoy our meal,
said Lydia. They all joined hands at the table while Daniel led the blessing according to Jewish traditions. Although he was not a fully practicing Jew, he held on to many traditions with which he was raised. Some of his family back in Israel had disowned him when he decided to marry Lydia, a Christian missionary. However, others kept in touch with them after they left Israel. After he had finished praying, he motioned to Lydia to lead a Christian prayer, which she concluded in Jesus' name. Joel and Davy eyeballed each other at this point in the prayer, since this step was a new one. Their raised eyebrows let each other know something was different about their parents' prayer, but it was pleasing nonetheless. Then they eagerly dug in, loading their plates with the elaborate spread.
Delicious food as always, Mom,
said Joel, scarfing down his food. Davy gave a thumbs up without coming up for breath, and Lydia and Rachel exchanged smiles.
I remember when I hated these salmon patties,
said Davy with his mouth full.
Bet you couldn't eat 10 of them,
said Joel, grateful for a home-cooked meal. Davy held up one finger while swallowing and grabbed several more off the plate.
Not this time. Wait until we've all finished, boys,
said Lydia, grinning and holding back the plate.
This weekend, you will have to be extra patient when we have Seder plates for Passover.
Then the next week will be Easter, when I can eat all I want,
said Davy, grinning with food in his teeth. Joel handed him a napkin, and Davy playfully snatched it to wipe his mouth.
Yes, and we will be sure to make plenty,
said Lydia with a grin.
I remember the days when we used to do this with your family, Daniel.
She continued.
We used to have a lot more family in our gatherings until, well, there's a lot of us you haven't met yet, Rachel. Have you spoken with Yosef lately, Daniel?
Not lately. I'll have to give him a call soon,
Daniel said. He paused.
Ima is not well.
They eyed one another, hesitating, but continued eating their meal.
We will have to pray for her,
said Lydia.
I always liked your mother, you know, even though you had your differences.
Daniel nodded, and she could tell that he would rather change the subject. Joel and Davy did not have any clear memories of her. They just remembered her from a few family portraits from before they were born.
Thanks so much for having me over for dinner, Mr. and Mrs. Daniel and Lydia.
We always love having you here, sweetie,
said Lydia. She glanced at Rachel's ring finger and saw that it was bare. Lydia eyed Joel, who looked down in guilt and tilted his shoulder slightly.
You're welcome any time,
said Daniel. After eating the main course, they were sure to finish the chocolate cake and ensured they left no leaven in the house. Joel remembered the old days when their mom would place tiny cupcakes around the house for him and Davy to find and devour before Passover. Then Lydia could not wait any longer. She looked at Daniel and asked,
Are you ready to give them their surprises? No sense in waiting a whole week.
Daniel smiled and nodded as Lydia got up to gather their gifts.
Presents? Oh boy,
Said Davy. Lydia handed 2 tiny golden boxes to Daniel.
Joel, Davy, I believe it is time for you to have these. You're both basically grown men now.
Daniel smiled and handed each of the boys a gift. They eagerly opened them to find 2 expensive-looking golden watches. They were identical to their dad's watch that they had seen him wear all their lives. Diamond and sapphire stones surrounded each dial. Joel looked closely and realized that they had the same type of jewels in the ring that his mother had given him several weeks before. Only the ring included amethysts as well. However, when he turned his wristband, he saw that his watch included matching amethysts to the ring. He was surprised their family could own such exquisite items since financial worries were always an issue.
These have been handed down for several generations in my family. The gears inside of these watches are ancient. See, they wind up as you move the watch from side to side, and they still keep perfect time. There is a family legend that these gemstones may have been the same ones God himself used to communicate with our ancestors during wartime, just as described in the Tanakh or Hebrew Bible. The theory is that the Babylonians may have broken and repurposed these gemstones when they captured our ancestors.
Our ancient historian Flavius Josephus recorded that rays of radiant light would burst forth from Aaron's breastplate stones as the Israelites were victorious in battle,
Added Lydia.
When the people saw that, they knew God was with them.
really? Whoa, that is amazing. Thanks, Mom and Dad.
Said Davy excitedly, taking his watch and putting it on his wrist. He imagined that the watch could give him powers like a superhero. He leaned forward, holding up his wrist and playfully shouting pew-pew noises like he was warding off his enemies. However, he shortly settled back into his seat, aware that he was holding a rare piece of jewelry and that he was not as little as he used to be. Just 2 years ago, he would have gotten up and run around the room until his dad would have had to correct his raucous behavior. Now he still had fun, but learned to settle down to keep the peace,
Those are amazing pieces of history that you are holding, you guys.
said Rachel.
I've never seen anything like that, and believe me, my mom loves to collect her jewelry.
We've never had anything like this.
Joel said. Davy agreed.
Could these really be from the same stones as Aaron's breastplate?
Joel gazed deeply into the stones, wondering. The boys had always admired their dad's watch, and now they finally had their own. On the face of each watch, a small yellowish-orange stone glistened, reflecting the lowering sunbeams shooting through the window. Davy turned it from side to side and noticed that the color kept changing within this particular gem.
What's this stone in the center, Dad? I can't tell if it's yellow, red, green, or blue. It keeps changing in the light.
You won't find a stone like that anywhere. I'm no gem expert, but from what I've found, it is an ancient gemstone that no longer exists. One Bible version calls it ligure, another calls it jacinth.
I've seen some translated as lapis lazuli or even opal,
Said Lydia. Daniel nodded.
We have the last ones in existence handed down from one of our Hebrew tribes, Gad. Our relatives have the largest piece of it back in Israel. You must be sure to take special care of them. Don't go around parading them and telling everyone what these are. Treasure hunters have been searching for these for centuries. It would draw the wrong kind of attention. God always protects us, but there is no sense in inviting danger.
Joel put his watch on and stared at the stones. They almost seemed like they were glowing.
We understand. Thanks, Dad. Thanks, Mom. These are amazing.
He said proudly.
I'll always keep it with me.
Me too.
Said Davy. They both decided never to take them off, just like their dad.
You are welcome, boys. These are built strong and waterproof, just like mine. They don't make things like this anymore,
Said Daniel. He hugged them and saw now more than ever that his boys were growing up. Joel was already the same age Daniel was when he met Lydia.
And this is for you, Rachel,
Said Lydia, handing her a beautifully wrapped quaint box with shiny blue paper.
Oh my goodness. You didn't have to do this. I have nothing to give you guys.
She said as she began to open the box.
Making our son happy is the best gift from you that we could ask for,
Said Lydia, smiling. Rachel pulled away the blue wrapping and opened the white leathery box. She gasped at its contents. a delicate golden chain with precious stones in its pendant.
Daniel gave this to me when we were a young couple. I want you to have it.
This is so beautiful. Are you sure?
Said Rachel, amazed at Lydia's generosity.
Of course I'm sure. Besides, it's not the only necklace I have.
Lydia handled another golden necklace around her neck with the lavender agate stone from her childhood. Its bright layers contoured into a mesmerizing swirling pattern against the darker shades.
We have no daughters of our own, so it is only right for you to have it. Yours matches Joel's watch. We want you to know how welcome you are into our family.
Thank you so much,
said Rachel, embracing Lydia and Daniel. She placed it around her neck with it hanging alongside her locket that her dad had given her years ago. It gave a feeling that she had longed for her whole life. Lydia already had acted like more of a mother than her own mom had ever done. Rachel leaned against Joel, comparing the matching stones in his watch with her necklace. The diamonds and amethysts spiraled toward the center where the sapphire stone rested beautifully.
As we said, we believe the stones in the watches and this necklace were made from the same cut. After the Holocaust, my grandfather uncovered several of these precious stones underneath our ancestral homestead in Jerusalem,
said Daniel.
He and his associates had pieced much of this story together in their archaeological studies. May God keep you all safe, especially in times such as these.
Even better, we have ancient buried treasure, Davy,
said Joel.
Yeah, this is so awesome. We should go back there someday and search for more,
said Davy. Daniel and Lydia exchanged knowing looks. Davy finished checking out his watch and had another thought.
Oh yeah, we almost forgot to tell you about that creepy dude after the floating city disappeared. Some tall, lanky guy in a black cloak chased us, but he disappeared when Officer Bill showed up. Officer Bill said that he was probably an old drunk.
Yeah, that guy gave me the creeps. His eyes were like two icy coals staring right through me. He almost attacked us,
said Rachel, shrugging her thin shoulders. She glanced outside and thought she saw a shadow. Then a black cat leaped into the window, making her jump in her seat.
Don't worry, if he shows up again, we'll take care of him for you. Ain't that right, Joel?
Said Daniel, holding up his bulky fist.
Yes, sir,
said Joel. He wasn't going to let that snake make Rachel feel vulnerable again. Lydia looked worried as she began gathering plates to take to the kitchen.
His face looked mangled, almost twisted around his nose or something,
said Davy. This comment made Daniel jump and drop his plate on the floor.
I'm sorry, sweetheart,
he said to Lydia. She began helping him pick up the pieces and exchanged a concerned look with Daniel. Joel noticed but remained silent. He and Rachel began to help clean up. Davy was grateful that the spilled food was not his fault this time and excused himself from the table. He flopped onto the couch with the remote and turned on the TV, still playing local news footage from earlier. Davy didn't pay attention and began typing in the search bar for his favorite gaming channel.
Wait, did that say Officer Bill?
Asked Lydia, referring to the newscast.
Yeah, I think so,
said Davy as he scarfed down the last of his food on the couch.
Davy, please turn the TV back on that newscast,
said Lydia. The family watched silently as the reporter confirmed what Lydia thought she had heard. An officer's body at a local scene had been identified, and his name could now be released. Officer Bill was dead.